Alright, sorry for not having posted as much. I actually didn't have a whole lot to talk about these last few weeks. I thought I would come up with something, but it's there's just not really a whole lot that's been going on through my mind. Been kind of doing other stuff, other than just like trolling Linux forums basically for content. So, what we're going to talk about today is the BSDs because I was talking to Linux Renaissance and we had a pretty interesting discussion. He had said he wanted something like FreeBSD to become more like normie friendly, something that like an average user can use. And I asked him what the problem was because I was like, yeah, obviously it's not very normie friendly yet. But my contention was I think it needed more access to software because I know you can run OBS on it, but there's still a lot of stuff that's kind of in its infancy, So I was like, I probably have to change my entire workflow to figure out how to even just record my desktop and a microphone input on my computer, you know? Like I don't know if I'm gonna be able to I could probably use Kden Live, but it'll depend on which BSD I'm using and then I don't know how I'm gonna get my like if I can get games to work, if I can get all my shit to work, I could probably get a pretty basic setup going though. If I like absolutely needed to use OpenBSD or FreeBSD or something. Well, he said, no, that's not the problem. The problem is desktops need to be more friendly. And I was like, well, how so? Because I was able to run Mate pretty well, and this had all kind of spawned from the news that KDE was dropping support for their login manager because it required login D. And so that means we're not quite yet at the point where you have to use systemd to run it or something, but we are at the point where you have to use Linux to run it because they're the only ones that has login. So, but SDDM's not really a problem. I don't know what the big hangup is. As long as SDDM is supported, you should be good to launch KDE for now. For now. And so he had said, we need to have all of the functionality of KDE working in the on the BSD, and I had said I don't know if that's going to work because that kind of goes against the BSD philosophy. Now, FreeBSD has a different philosophy from NetBSD, which has a different philosophy from OpenBSD and Dragonfly BSD, TrueOS, and all that. So it's not like it's all one big thing, but the one thing that they do all pretty much have is a more strict adherence to the Unix philosophy. And because of that, you're not going to get the same subsystems as in Linux. Like you're not going to have the same audio server. You're not going to have the same power management system and all that. So a lot of things just aren't going to work the same way. So I said basically you're asking them to just turn into Linux. I don't think that's going to work the way they think it will. Because I was trying Ghost BSD and I remember trying to change the volume and I had to ask on their IRC. I was like, "Hey, why isn't the volume thing working? It selects and then it shuts off or whatever, or like it resets." And they said, "Oh, it's because you have to do it the BSD way, the free BSD way, not the Linux way." And that kind of made me curious because I was like, "Oh, BSD really is like a half-baked Linux." Like, I'm not really gaining anything by switching to BSD, but I'm losing a hell of a lot of shit that I had on Linux. And so that kind of put me off of it for a while. I was like, oh, maybe this isn't really worth trying except on a computer where I just need basic functionality. And that had reminded me of, BSD can't really ship code that's GPL'd or whatever. I was like, but you can make like BSD license projects for all of this, or maybe MIT if you can use MIT. I don't know. Like, especially as we're getting into like Rust core utils and stuff, is we're reaching a point where we're getting more permissively licensed stuff, and personally, I'm all about that. Like, I know that's a horrible thing to say for free software, but I actually do like permissive licenses when it comes to specific software where I do want it to be cross-platform. I do want it accessible to people that run the BSDs. If it has to be used by people that run Windows or Mac OS, that's a side effect that I'm okay with. It's like I have to push the free software mindset, but a permissive license is still free software, so I have no real qualms with that. There's a lot of people that do though. They call it the cuck license or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, it kind of is. Like I can't argue with that, but it's the mindset you need to have. It's the I don't want to deal with you license. Like, just take my code and do whatever you want with it, and just don't call my lawyer. That's basically what we're dealing with. So yeah, I just didn't really see a. I haven't really seen a reason for me personally to move to any of the BSDs. I do have OpenBSD running on that Mac, and that's pretty cool, for like a cool computer. And I run Haiku on this mini PC, so that's always really cool. Everybody likes the Haiku desktop. But as far as switching to BSD goes, I'm like, yeah, it's not really normie friendly, but that's because it just doesn't have the software I need on it, you know? And maybe someday it'll get there where it does have that software, but we're talking like 10, maybe 20 years down the line. And by that point, Linux will probably have so much better software that they'll be like, okay, well, why am I switching to BSD, which is now 10, 20 years behind Linux, Which is kind of where I'm at right now. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Just I thought that was an interesting conversation. I thought, what do you think really about how BSD could become more normie friendly? Is it purely a desktop issue, or is it more a I need all the stuff that runs in Linux to run on the BSDs? All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.